Malcolm Roberts was elected as a federal senator for One Nation.
Senator for Queensland.
Senator for Queensland.
Not One Nation.
Thank you for correcting me. And as you can tell, he's a very shy intellectual type. But look, he's a graduate of University of Queensland. He has a degree in mining engineering. As an MBA from the University of Chicago, and as Ian Plimer reminded me this afternoon, he also started the coalface in the mines back in the day. He started his own consultancy firm back in the 90s, I believe, late 90s. Look, he's, I guess he's one of the most outspoken commentators in this country on the matters of climate change, and I guess that's enough for me, because let's see if I can. Ladies and gentlemen, Malcolm Roberts.
Thank you. I'll just time this to make sure, because I could talk all day on this, all day and all night. But first of all, I want you all to congratulate yourselves, or congratulate ourselves, because we are awake. That's why we're here. This is a record capacity crowd, and it's wonderful to see not only the support for Alan, but the support for this scam being ended. I want to talk about how this is affecting us, and I want to convey two words: deindustrialisation and control. Deindustrialisation and control, and they're causing us to lose our freedom, both not only choices of how we spend our money, but also how we live our lives. Because I'm very, very proud to be a human. We are the most advanced species on this planet, and we are the only species that knows what we're doing in terms of our impact on the planet. And we need to be very proud of that, because at its heart, this campaign on climate is anti-human. That is what it's all about. It is about control, destroying freedom, and it is anti-human. And I'd like everyone to remember what's happened over the last 160 years. That's a very, very short time. And yet we have liberated billions of people from destitution, from starvation, from being at the whims of Mother Nature, the vagaries of climate and weather. And that is remarkable, and it's due to one thing: cheap energy, and ever cheapening energy until recently. And it's also due to human creativity. Alan discusses in his book, which I haven't read, but I know Alan, and I just have not seen the book until just now. Alan discusses what's happening, why it's happening, who's driving it, where it affects us, when and how. And he also comes up with some solutions. We first met on the steps outside Victoria's Parliament House, I think, where Alan and I were both speaking about we were speaking against the carbon dioxide tax. Before going any further, I'd like to honour some people in this room, acknowledge people like Viv, who's been doing this for so many years, exposing this, John Smead, Janesse Waring, and many others. Andrew Cooper, because he's been a very strong speaker for freedom. And also Darren Nelson, our economist here, who advises us and keeps our eyes open on government control. Alan Moran, though, is a very highly competent and respected economist. And he's done a good work on the science. But I'm going to share a few things, and I asked his permission to do this. And if Ian Plimer wants to challenge me on these, I will certainly debate him one day on this. Because although Alan's gone to a very good source, Richard Lindzen, for his climate work, and it is a good source, times have moved on, and the empirical evidence shows that at its core, carbon dioxide from any source does not affect climate. Agreed. Does not affect climate. From human sources, it's absolutely impossible for us to affect climate, and here's why. And I said these things to Fred Singer, and Fred Singer, 2 years ago, he changed his mind and he agrees. First of all, carbon dioxide, the NOAA satellite, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration satellite, if you look at their data, I can't remember the exact satellite, but if you look at their data from the measurement of the long-wave radiation leaving the top of the atmosphere, there is more long-wave radiation leaving the top of the atmosphere now than 20 years ago. So where's all this carbon dioxide that's trapping long-wave radiation? It's nonsense. That is a NOAA satellite. They don't talk about that. And what's more, we've seen the level of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere increasing, looking at your way, And yet the long-wave radiation leaving the top of the atmosphere is increasing. There is no trapping of carbon dioxide above a certain amount. The ModTrans 6 simulator shows that it assesses the retention of heat in the atmosphere. All the capacity of carbon dioxide to retain heat in the atmosphere is done by the time we get to 0.03%. 0.03%. No more effect from retaining heat. Carbon dioxide has no greenhouse effect, enhanced greenhouse effect above 0.03%. And by the way, carbon dioxide is not a heat source. It cannot warm anything. It is not a heat source. Water vapour, which supposedly increases this so-called greenhouse effect, which doesn't exist. Water vapour is a temperature modulator and it has a net cooling effect on our planet. Isn't that right, Ian?
Correct.
Number 2, let's look at our carbon dioxide. Empirical evidence shows that seasonally we have enormous swings in the Northern Hemisphere in carbon dioxide levels, independent of our roughly consistent production. So it doesn't matter whether we're producing consistently, the level goes up and down, up and down. And if we look at it over the longer period, carbon dioxide changes in relation to temperature changes. So we do not have any effect through our carbon dioxide on the level of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, which in turn doesn't drive temperature. That's simple, it's in the data. And if we go further, if you look at Henry's law, and you understand what happens with the oceans absorbing and expelling and desorbing carbon dioxide, what happens there is that the oceans control the level of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere because the oceans contain 50 to 70 times more carbon dioxide in dissolved form than the entire atmosphere. And that changes, the solubility changes according to temperature. Mother Nature takes care of the level of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere and we cannot affect it. Well, let's look at the temperature and carbon dioxide relationships. What we're told is that level of carbon dioxide drives the temperature. If you look at the actual data, changes in temperature occur before changes in carbon dioxide. It's the complete reverse of what we're told. And there are also periods where the reverse happens. If you look at the longest single temperature trend in the last 120 years, it was 40 years from 1930s to 1976. 40 years of cooling, thank you. And what was the human production of carbon dioxide during at that time? Increasing dramatically at record rates. So there is no temperature signal, there is no signal between our carbon dioxide and temperature changes. Well, let's look at temperature. In the satellite era, we've had now 40 years, from 1979, we've had going close to 40 years, and we see no unnatural change, just natural variation. No signal of human activity affecting temperature. The longest temperature trend, 40 years of cooling, while carbon dioxide was increasing dramatically from us. And by the way, in America, the 1930s were warmer than today. In Australia, in the 1880s and 1890s, it was warmer than today, with longer heat waves, more days above 100 degrees or 37 degrees Celsius. We are not warming unusually. It is now cooler than the medieval warming period. There is nothing unusual going, just natural cycles of warming and cooling. If we look at the climate factors like rainfall, snowfall, storms, severity, frequency, no change. If we look at ocean acidification, actually it's alkalinity, no change. So let's look at the agencies that have been telling us there's something happening. The CSIRO. First thing I did after being sworn in as a senator was send a letter to the CSIRO requesting a presentation on the empirical evidence that shows we are causing climate variability. I got it after a lot of running around. They have no evidence proving human cause, none at all. I haven't got time to go into the details, but I'm happy to do that. We've put it on the website. The chief scientist, I asked him as a result of Senate estimates a few months ago, no evidence either. And not only no evidence, complete contradiction of the empirical evidence. Bureau of Meteorology, no evidence. They all rely on NASA's Goddard Institute of Space Studies and the UN IPCC. And the UN IPCC, when we look at the last 3 reports, 2001, 2007 and 2013, they have one chapter each claiming warming and attributing it to carbon dioxide from human activity. And not one of them has any evidence that we are doing it. Not one. So the CSIRO relies on the IPCC, which doesn't have any evidence. And we rely on the CSIRO. The NASA's Goddard Institute of Space Studies, there's no empirical evidence that we're affecting the climate. None at all. And what's more, I've been chasing them and writing letters to them, and they have admitted that far from the 4 independent sources of temperature data, they rely on NOAA, which we already knew. There's only one, and it's corrupted. This is crap. That is the only word I can think of it. So in the absence of science, people divert. They divert to appeals to authority. They divert to a false consensus. The 97% consensus has been shown by a peer-reviewed scientific paper to be 0.3% consensus. And none of them have any empirical evidence proving humans affect climate. So there's a false consensus. Then we look at the politics. Penny Wong made massive misrepresentations of the climate to set it up for Rudd. We have serial misrepresentatives of serial misrepresentatives of climate. Tim Flannery, David Caroli, Will Steffen, Ross Garnaut, Matthew England, Ove Goldberg from my old university, Kurt Lambach, Andy Pittman, Leslie Hughes. I know them off by heart because I've questioned every one of them. Not one of them has any evidence. John Howard, a Liberal Prime Minister. He imposed the RET. He imposed the theft of stealing land rights from farmers to comply with Kyoto, as Alan has said. He was the first political leader in this country to put in place as party policy an emissions trading scheme. A Liberal. Is there any wonder I left the Liberals? So, and now what have we got? We've got John Howard 4 years after he left politics saying, I'm agnostic on climate. So he is destroying our economy. Barnaby Joyce, once the strongest politician speaking against climate, now with the threat of Tony Windsor in the last election, agreeing to blow $400 million of taxpayer funds on wind farms. Nothing's happening. So nothing's happening to climate. So what's driving it? It's very simple. The UN is driving it. The banks are driving it. They're standing to make trillions of dollars. They've admitted that. The climate industry, they've got the academics on board relying upon their grants. Non-government organisations, WWF, Greenpeace, overseas funders, Rockefeller Foundation, destroying industry. I said deindustrialisation. They mean it. Maurice Strong was the man who started this back in 1972 when he formed the United Nations Environmental Programme and then quickly got on to global warming. The UN's Oil for Food program showed him out to be a crook. The USA police have wanted him for the last 10, 15 years. I think it is for criminal activities, possibly. He's a master, he died in 2015, was a master manipulator. He is the modern day Colonel Edward Mandell House that formed the privately owned Federal Reserve Bank. And I say that deliberately because the same tactics we used for the last 40 years as we used for the 40 years leading to the formation of the privately owned Federal Reserve Bank. 1972, the Liberals, 1972, it started. 1992, we had the signing of the Rio de Janeiro Declaration for 21st Century Global Governance. It's out in the open. We are marching to their tune. It is out in the open. It is a campaign that Maurice Strong said he has two aims. He had two aims: deindustrialisation of Western civilization and putting in place a socialist global governance unelected. That's what he said. Christiana Figueres is the latest leader of the UNFCCC, which oversees the climate fraud, has said the same thing. We don't need anyone else to debunk it. The Lima Declaration was signed by Labor Party's Gough Whitlam in 1975. The following year, his archenemy, Malcolm Fraser, ratified it. And that has destroyed manufacturing in this country. It's all there in black and white from the UNIDO. The 1992 Rio de Janeiro Declaration, as I said, was for a commitment to 21st century global governance unelected. Paul Keating signed it. And Greg Hunt, Malcolm Turnbull, Robert Hill, the senator, have all pushed it, as have Penny Wong, Tony Burke. This is nothing new. I'll skip comments about the ABCC because I've got to shorten up. So we've seen the Greens and the ALP smear people. What's very interesting is that the Liberal Party and the National Party senators, when I speak in the Senate, come up and encourage me to keep going. And that is wonderful. And have you noticed because of what we've been saying and because of South Australia, coal is now okay with the Prime Minister after 10 years of being debunked. We are going to end this scam. The core problem, though, is government. The Commonwealth government is out of control. We have two mobs, one in the Labor Party, one in the Liberal Party, that are effectively controlled by just a small group of people who control pre-selection. That's why, even though we know there are sceptics in the Labor Party, we know there are, and we know there are a majority, according to Barnaby Joyce, sceptics in the coalition, that's why very few people speak up, because they're controlled. Maurice Strong's masterstroke was aligning the interests of people and money, vested interests, parasites that Alan talks about, getting control of NGOs like Greenpeace and WWF to set the agenda, then get the media to follow, then get the emotive arguments, then change the language. We now have sustainability, which ironically is sustainable only with subsidies. It's unsustainable. We have biodiversity stealing farmers' property rights. That really gets to me. I've seen people suiciding. I've not seen them suiciding. I know people who are related to people suiciding over this. And the government doesn't care, Labor Party or Liberal Party. Al Gore's company is one of the largest shareholders on the Chicago Climate Exchange. And who was one of his co-directors? Maurice Strong. Who was pushing this around the world? Al Gore. Carbon dioxide trading. We now have a national energy market, which is just a parasitic accumulation of regulations, subsidies in many forms, the renewable energy target, more regulations, vested interests and politicisation. It is no more a market than I'm 7 foot tall. We have a massive wealth redistribution scheme in place under our noses. It is as plain as day. And it's part of a bigger picture. Well, actually, look at Arium, South Australia. Nick Xenophon subsidised the intermittents. I don't call them renewables, they're intermittents. And Nick Xenophon is now destroying his state. And Nick Xenophon then turns around and says, let's have some subsidies to protect our steel mill that is being destroyed by high energy prices. So we've now got subsidies for both sides. And who's paying? We are. And South Australia is paying doubly. So this is part of a bigger scheme. Farmers' property rights, miners. The AMWU was sitting in front of me at Senate estimates on Tuesday saying they want to see carbon dioxide trading and other schemes come in. What about the coal miners' jobs? Well, our members, AMWU, will get jobs on solar farms. What about the coal miners' jobs? CFMEU looks after coal miners, doesn't it? Yet they are one of the funders of GetUp and other organisations that are pushing this carbon scam, driving coal miners out of work. We are living in an insane country. Food is being affected. Murray-Darling Basin, we could talk for hours on that. Energy. I've been around southwestern Queensland recently. Number one issue, everyone, energy prices. And we live in a state with the best clean coal in the world. Hunter Valley, when I was a kid, I used to cycle past the smelter there, Kurri. It's now shut because energy prices are too high. It came here because of the Hunter Valley's coal. 5 issues that we have in Queensland, listening to people, because in between sittings in Parliament we get out and we listen in the bush and in the cities. Energy, regulations, taxes, property rights, infrastructure. It is basic stuff. And this is what happens. All of these are being destroyed. The basics are being destroyed because the government is interfering. It kills creativity, which is the source of all human progress. Inventors and entrepreneurs who succeed are driven by a very simple philosophy. If they produce something for sale and you like it, they win and you win. Government is driven by win-lose. It is that simple, everyone. And I'm now getting a taste of the complete lack of any understanding of cost-benefit analysis in our Parliament. Any. And you can verify that, Darren, our economist. What we've now got is, it's something that's happened before. In the 1880s through to 1913, we had 40 years of academics and others and politicians colluding to set up the Federal Reserve Bank. The same tactics have been used for the last 40 years since 1972. The same tactics. Harry Truman, the president, said, the only thing new in the world is the history you haven't read. It has all happened before. None of this is new. We now export our pollutants overseas. Actually, our power stations are very clean, so we don't export that. When we export our jobs to countries using old power station technology, they produce real pollution, particulates, sulfur dioxide, nitrous oxides. We are increasing the pollution of the world by this carbon dioxide madness. The number one thing for driving down the birth rate and reducing the human footprint is prosperity. The number one thing for prosperity is productivity. The number one thing for productivity is low energy prices. It is simple stuff. This is an anti-human agenda. We're wanting millions of Indians and other nationalities to live in poverty. We are taxing people through a regressive taxation system in this country because electricity prices, they're increasing dramatically. And that is a highly regressive tax because electricity is fundamental. It is not a luxury. So what we're doing is we're just entrenching poverty, reversing human progress, and we're also killing free speech. Al Gore's movie demonized humans, said we don't care. And if you don't agree with this, you are uncaring. You are thieving. You are corrupt. You don't understand the science. And when you look at Al Gore's movie, at the end he says, I appeal to your care. What a bastard. He actually demonized us in the movie, saying we don't care, and then he appeals to our care, because that is fundamental with we humans. We do care. We can stop the deindustrialization by having more of these functions and by speaking up, because we need to reindustrialize very, very quickly. The establishment elites are no longer suppressing the voice of the powerless and the voiceless, because Donald Trump is showing that, Brexit's showing that, we're showing that. We call unashamedly and proudly for an Oz exit, a getting out of the UN. Go ahead. We also must be very careful of something else. There is only one major division in Australian politics: freedom versus control. That's it. No right, left, that's the nonsense. There's another subsidiary division: taxpayers versus tax takers. And the tax takers are growing partly because our tax system is so corrupt. And at its heart, this climate scam is a tax scam to rip off money from us to fund the UN. So we are making progress. We've got the foundations laid for exposing the scam scientifically, and the CSIRO and the chief scientist. I honestly believe it won't be as long as I thought now before this is exposed, but John knows we've said that before. The other thing, though, is that coal is now okay, so we can start building power stations once we undo the rat's nest of parasites that are distorting our power system and our energy system, because no one will invest right now. They don't know what the game is next year. So I would just finish by saying that we all need to recognise that in this massive scam, there's a huge opportunity. It's a huge opportunity, because people like Alan, people like Ian Plimer, John Smead, Viv Forbes, others in this room have shown that we are not conned by literally decades of bullshit and literally billions of dollars of propaganda. We are still realising there's nothing there. That's remarkable. It's remarkable. Pat yourselves on the back and let's get stuck into this and finish it off. And with Alan's book, I think we've got a remarkable chance at showing people that it's the economics, stupid. And Alan, thank you very much indeed. I look forward to reading it.
Yeah.
A little bit of time for some questions. One rule at Liberty Works: don't disguise speeches with questions. Alan was free to take questions, but I believe Ian and Malcolm will too. Over to you.
Question for Senator Roberts. I agree entirely with what you said. I think most guys can do. But why on earth is Farmers Federation, the Chamber of Industry, etc., supporting this emissions intensity?
Two reasons.
How can they be so blind?
Two reasons. Money, because there's money in it for following these schemes, and the second reason is cowardice. If we look at the coal companies, you'll find only a handful of coal executives and chairmen who actually are speaking against this scam, and yet all of them are seeing their industry threatened. All of them. So it comes back to the same thing that applies in federal parliament, and that is weakness and gutlessness and ignorance on the part of many, and some collusion on the part of a few. It's largely human behaviour, weakness, gutlessness and ignorance.
Just over the back there, Tim.
Malcolm, there's a prevailing narrative, particularly on ABC, when you get like an anti-climate change politician, that they're backed up by like the coal lobby. Why isn't equally so there the narrative that a pro-climate change politician is backed up by the climate change lobby?
You're asking me about the ABC and as to why that happens? I think we all know why that happens. The ABC, with only a few exceptions, are just completely on the control side of politics. I've done interviews with the ABCC. They try and shut me down, try and not let me answer the question. Control. At its heart, control always is, underneath control there's always fear. They fear the truth coming out. The ABC is just a propaganda outfit. The ABC regularly produces photos of steam billowing out in massive quantities while they're talking about carbon dioxide, clearly giving the illusion. A very good friend of mine, Bob, in Chapel Hill, Bob Brock, he challenged them on that. They ignored it for many, many years. They finally relented and said, "You are right, we will stop." Within a few months, they were back doing it again. They cannot help themselves. We have got to either defund the ABC or sell it off. I don't know who would buy it, though.
My question is about arguing rather than the facts. I go to university, so it's kind of hard for me to deal with that kind of stuff, as you all know. What's the best way to demolish arguments that contain appeals to authority?
Show me the evidence. That's the question you ask. Really simple. Show me the evidence. Oh, you're talking about carbon pollution. Can we just make sure we're talking about the same thing? It's carbon dioxide. Oh, yes, yes. It's the same carbon dioxide we're talking about, isn't it? Oh, yes, yes. What's its molecular weight? 44. And immediately, 44. And immediately you've got it. So stick always to evidence, which then can be validated and can be reproduced. Once you get in an argument with a fundamentalist, you've lost.
Any of the speakers, in all of this debate on energy, cost of energy, why is there never any consideration given to nuclear power?
Well, I live in a state in Australia where we have 38% of the world's uranium. Look up the Liberal Party policy for the state of South Australia. Their economic policy has 2 points. The first is no fracking in the Otway Basin, despite the fact that a lot of gas comes out of the Otway Basin across the border. And the second thing is no nuclear industry in South Australia. That is a Liberal Party policy coming out of the state in Australia which has 38% of the world's uranium. The bulk of the population lives in a country town called Adelaide. There's virtually no one that lives out in the sticks. We have flatline rocks which haven't been cooked up or bent for only 1800 million years. We are in one of the most stable parts of the world. It is absolute madness that we do not have a nuclear industry with maybe a 2 gigawatt reactor at Roxby Downs, putting it, electrons don't care which way to go, and put it down the line the other way. It is just ridiculous that the South Australian government took perverse pornographic greed in blowing up a coal-fired power station at Port Augusta, when that would be a beautiful site because you've got all the high voltage lines to put in a nuclear reactor. You can buy nuclear reactors now, General Electric, Hitachis, etc. You can almost get into Bunnings and buy one. And you can put it on a B-double and you can service a decent sized city with that. It is absolute madness in this country, but it comes to a very fundamental human thing. We can't see genes, we can't see radiation, we can't see carbon dioxide. We whistle in the dark and we are frightened of things we can't see. And it is a wonderful propaganda mechanism to frighten people with things we can't see. There is a view in evolutionary biology that we would not have life on Earth without radiation and without radioactivity. And that is one of the 23 reasons why we've got complex life on Earth. And I'm not going to give you the other 22 unless I have a beer for each one of them. We are reaping the rewards of dumbing down our education system so much that people do not understand what radioactivity is. Now, in this state, you grow a lot of bananas. That is the most radioactive material you can have. You get beta radiation from potassium-40 breakdown. So on one hand, they say no nuclear power while they're munching on their banana. It's mad.
We'll take one more question.
One over here.
Oh, sorry, we'll take two then. First down here.
I've got a question for Senator Roberts, that in a positive sense. Would you make a comment on the probability of being able to use your influence in Parliament to expose the hopes the people here tonight recognise, to bring it to public notice that would enable academia to admit the truth?
I believe we can, and we've already started that. That was the very first thing I did as soon as I was sworn in as a senator. I left, wrote a letter to the CSIRO, and then the chase began. And so we'll be pursuing that. There are so many tangles and so much dishonesty that it is going to be difficult still, but I don't think it'll be years before that's untangled. I'm hoping it'll be months. That's really, but it is such a difficult thing that I don't think even Ian Plimer would put a time limit on that, would you?
I've got the perfect solution, John. Put a huge amount of money into a research fund for people to undertake research on natural climate change, and immediately, because scientific research in universities is not about knowledge, it's not about aspiring to higher things, it's not about honesty, it's all about money. And just expose it for what it is. Put 100 million out there and say, this is for research on natural climate change, and they find it.
But first, we've got to get hold of the people who actually allocate that money and embarrass them into it. But I just want to show this because John Smead's a perfect person to raise this with. It's 7,000 treaties plus that this country has signed. 7,000. We don't control our country. The sovereignty is controlled by places outside, largely in the UN. And it's done silently, but very deliberately by a handful of people. They control what we do with our resources, our money, our time. And 73% of a local council money that we were told about in the Shire of Boulogne just recently comes from the federal government with strings attached. So we don't have a competitive federalism anymore that's supposed to have massive power within the state governments for doing things. We have one central government that allocates the money through state governments and central and councils, and they control what happens at all levels. More than 50% of state government expenditure is from the Commonwealth Government with strings attached. We are centrally governed, contradicting our Constitution, John, and you know that, and what we have to do is bring back our Constitution.
We have Tweedledum, and then Tweedledum with his 50% renewable target. They added on and apply the ABC, which is like a great big boombox for promoting all this rubbish. Surely one of the ways to really attack it is to chop the ABC right down and eliminate it. What can you do about that?
Do you want to talk about that? I'm happy to.
We need more than an axe.
Well, first of all, it comes back to those who actually control the purse strings. That's the coalition. And more coalition people are agreeing with us because we're being effective. They know that. And most of them are skeptics anyway. So what we have to do is just keep exposing it. Senator Fierravanti Wells, she has been chasing the ABC. And maybe with more of us chasing the ABC, because Brian Burston's chasing them as well, I'm chasing them, then more of the people will become aware that we have to do something about the waste of our money and the corruption of our country, driven by a taxpayer-funded organisation that is advocating taking more of our money and handing it to corrupted vested interests. So all we can do is put more and more pressure and highlight what they're doing.
Ladies and gentlemen, that'll bring us to the end. I just want to say Liberty Works is an organisation that's a campaign organisation. We believe the removal of these renewable energy targets is one of the most important things that we can do as a nation right now, because the Green Left are using that as a way to socialise not only this country but all the countries, and they're using the UN and using those treaties and using every means possible in order to get your taxpayer dollars to fund their particular religious beliefs. I've read this book. Malcolm, all the things that you've said in that book are not inconsistent with this. Ian, if to win an argument is to present the facts, then this book is the Bible, because it's got the facts in it.
One little comment. Either I have supreme psychic powers with great energy flowing out of my body, which I know you think is true, or I con you. And it's so easy to con people. And you saw it with that spoon. So easy. You were con. You know you were con. You don't know how I did it. You were con. And it's so easy to con people. And that's what we're up against. People who are saying, for God's sake, don't con me. And that's what we're up against.
Look forward to your next book. The book is for sale. I understand, Anthony, it's a special price tonight, $20, which is a bargain. Make sure you get your copy. Alan will sign it. I'm sure the other gentlemen here will sign it if they want. First of all, ladies and gentlemen, can we please thank Ian Plimer. A big round of applause for the compelling Malcolm Roberts.
Thank you.
Before I close, Liberty Works has launched a petition, amongst other activities that we're doing in order to attack these renewable energy targets. If you feel passionate about this, and I'm sure you do, please go to noret.org.au, sign the petition, and leave some comments. We've got to get this thing done and dusted. We've got to move on. noret.org.au.
And how about a big round of applause for Andrew Cooper and Alan Moran?